The Iranian capital was thrown into chaos in the early hours of today, following a series of devastating Israeli airstrikes that struck at the heart of Tehran.
نزدیک پادگان قلمرویه. پادگان قلمرویه اینجا.
بسیار مؤثر هست که یکی از اونها
در خلال صحبت شما تصاویر نتنز رو هم بینندگان زنده دارن مشاهده میکنن و دود ناشی از انفجاری که به نظر میرسه دقایقی پیش اتفاق افتاده.
خب مثلا ما در حوزه نتنز، خب طبعا نتنز یک مرکز غنیسازی هست که روی سطح زمین هست، بنابراین رژیم به راحتی آمده و اقدام علیه اون انجام داده و همین موضوع سبب شد که
Charred buildings, rising plumes of black smoke, and emergency sirens created a grim backdrop for a nation now bracing for what could escalate into one of the most dangerous military confrontations in the region's modern history. At least a dozen senior officers of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, including key nuclear scientists, were confirmed killed in what analysts are describing as one of the boldest Israeli operations to date on Iranian soil. Eyewitness images shared on social media and verified by local sources depicted smoldering ruins in central Tehran, with emergency responders sifting through debris as terrified residents fled the impacted zones. Among the casualties were Major General Hossein Salami, the long-serving commander of the IRGC, Major General Gholam Ali Rashid, commander of the influential Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, and Feridun Abbasi, one of Iran's most prominent nuclear scientists and former head of the country's atomic energy organization. Another significant loss for the Islamic Republic was Mohammad Mehdi Tehranchi, a nuclear physicist and advisor involved in Iran's nuclear program. The deaths of these figures are seen as a devastating blow to both Iran's military leadership and its nuclear infrastructure, particularly given the highly sensitive nature of the projects they oversaw. Salami, known for his fiery anti-Israel rhetoric, had once declared that Iran would be the final roar against Israeli aggression in West Asia.
I warn all enemies that we will give a decisive, destructive and crushing response in case of any practical threat against the Islamic Republic.
Major General Hossein Salami stressed Tehran has never initiated any war, but is prepared for any conflict launched against it. He noted despite suffering defeats, the enemies of the Iranian nation have not learned from their mistakes. The general noted that the enemies have gotten used to advancing their agenda through threats, but the approach will ultimately fail.
The strike's timing has also raised eyebrows among regional analysts and observers. Coming at a moment when Tehran was reportedly preparing for back-channel negotiations with key international actors, the operation appears to fit the pattern of psychological warfare that Israeli intelligence and military units have frequently been accused of deploying. Historically, Israel has launched calculated strikes or covert operations when its adversaries appear poised for diplomatic engagements or internal consolidation, a tactic designed to unsettle leadership circles and derail negotiations. This particular attack, targeting both military commanders and nuclear experts, has been interpreted as a calculated message. No position of influence within Iran is beyond reach. In response, Iran immediately activated elements of its retaliatory military doctrine. As of the latest reports, over 200 drones had been launched from Iranian territory, moving westward across Iraqi airspace toward Israeli targets. Witnesses in Baghdad and Basra reported sightings of low-flying drones traversing the skies in the early evening, with Iraqi air defense systems placed on high alert to avoid accidental engagements. Military analysts familiar with Iranian strategic doctrine indicated that these drones are not intended as precision strike weapons in themselves. Instead, their primary purpose is to saturate and exhaust Israel's multi-layered air defense systems, including the Iron Dome, David's Sling and Arrow missile batteries, ahead of a more sophisticated missile salvo. This tactic, employed previously in limited confrontations with U.S. bases in Iraq, involves sending slow-moving, difficult-to-detect drones to drain interceptor stockpiles and force defensive radar systems into continuous operation.
Can you tell us what you saw and heard overnight first?
Yes. In the middle of the night, we woke up to explosions, and we saw that in our neighborhood and other neighborhoods, the Israeli regime used missiles to bomb apartment buildings, and a large number of women and children have been killed. That's not something that you've been pointing out over the last 10 minutes of pro-Israeli propaganda. But without a doubt, people across the country are angered. This was unprovoked. It was an act of aggression. But of course, in the West, when they support a Holocaust in Gaza, obviously, when they support the genocidal strikes in Beirut, when they support daily murders in the West Bank, there's not going to be much sympathy for the women and children lying on the streets in Tehran. But the Iranian response will be devastating, and it will be something that the Israeli regime will regret.
Despite the audacity of the drone launch, questions have already surfaced regarding their actual military effectiveness. Experts noted that, given the speed and range of these drones, it would take approximately 7 hours for them to approach the airspace surrounding Tel Aviv. This has provided ample time for Israeli, American and British air assets to engage the inbound threats. As of this report, joint squadrons of U.S. and Royal Air Force fighter jets, alongside Israeli Air Force, IAF, warplanes, were actively intercepting the drones over Iraqi and Jordanian airspace. Numerous interceptions have been reported, with debris from downed drones falling in uninhabited desert areas, though a few were reportedly able to advance further toward Israeli-held positions in the occupied Golan Heights. Iran's leadership, meanwhile, issued an unambiguous message to both Israel and its Western backers. In an official address, leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, vowed what he described as severe punishment for the attacks. To the great Iranian nation, the Zionist regime has committed a crime in our dear country today at dawn with its satanic, blood-stained hands. It has revealed its malicious nature even more than before by targeting residential areas. The Zionist regime should anticipate a severe punishment. By God's grace, the powerful arm of the Islamic Republic's armed forces won't let them go unpunished. In the enemy's attacks, several commanders and scientists have been martyred. God willing, their successors and colleagues will carry on with their duties without delay. With this crime, the Zionist regime has prepared for itself a bitter, painful fate, which it will definitely see. Many people have questioned what they called a massive intelligence failure in Iran because their leaders knew about the imminent threat of war from Israel and yet decided to hold their meetings in an exposed people instead of a bunker that cost the lives of many military leaders. Iran's air defense systems faltered significantly during the operation, exposing critical weaknesses. Despite possessing advanced systems like the Russian-supplied S-300 and domestically developed Bavar 373, Iran's air defenses were overwhelmed by the speed, scale, and stealth of the Israeli assault. The initial wave of Israeli strikes targeted radar and SAM sites, blinding Iran's ability to detect incoming aircraft. Electronic warfare tactics, including jamming and spoofing, further disrupted Iran's command and control network, delaying response times. Iran's air defense systems were geographically concentrated around key cities like Tehran and Isfahan, leaving rural and border areas vulnerable, which Israel exploited to penetrate Iranian airspace. Reports indicate that Iran's radar operators failed to detect the low-flying F-35I jets, and many SAM systems were either disabled or ineffective against the precision-guided munitions. Iran's Air Force, equipped with outdated aircraft like the F-14 Tomcats, did not scramble in time to intercept the Israeli jets, further highlighting the gap in readiness. Iran's lapses in air defense preparedness and response were glaring and warrant significant criticism. First, Iran's over-reliance on a limited number of advanced systems like the S-300, without adequate redundancy or integration, left critical gaps in coverage. The country's air defense network lacked the depth and coordination needed to counter a sophisticated adversary like Israel, which employed stealth technology and electronic warfare effectively. Second, Iran's failure to modernize its air force and radar systems meant it could not detect or engage low-flying stealth aircraft, a known strength of Israel's air force. Third, the lack of real-time intelligence and situational awareness, compounded by the disruption of communication networks, delayed Iran's response, allowing Israel to complete multiple strike waves before Iran could mount a meaningful defense. Additionally, Iran's political and military leadership appeared unprepared for the scale of the attack, despite prior warnings and the precedent of Israeli strikes in October 2024. This complacency, coupled with inadequate training and maintenance of air defense systems, reflects a systemic failure to prioritize and adapt to evolving threats.